Let's think of a scenario. You are part of a group project with 3 other people. There's Barbara, a straight-A student, self-dubbed academic weapon who enjoys walks in the local park in between weaponizing academia. George, an enthusiastic data science student who has been to many networking events, has extensive knowledge in various programming languages, and is looking forward to doing an intensive placement this summer. And then there's Eddie, who is averaging a third and likes to spend his Thursday nights lightly toasted while duetting Bonnie Tyler's Total Eclipse of the Heart with his platonic soulmate Oliver at the local pub's karaoke night. Your lecturer has painstakingly put together a task involving programming an extension to an already existing invoicing system. How do you go about this? Planning and monitoring is one of the more mundane parts of software project management, and unfortunately, as all mundane things normally are, it's pretty much a compulsory part of the process. In application to this group, the first thing which has taken place is the random assignment of the project manager. In this case it will be Barbara, which is probably fine. George is a bit disgruntled, but you'll learn to ignore his technobabble and wrong opinions with time. Eddie will spend the next week completely unaware that the group even exists. So where does it all go from here? Well, to the planning stage, of course. There are 2 types of planning which can take place at this stage: plan-driven and agile planning. Agile is usually ideal for smaller projects and is also very useful for projects which require a lot of stakeholder feedback. It generally involves an iterative process through which the development team will deliver the product to the customer in separate stages. What's included in an iteration is based off of the customer's priorities. This does, however, mean that a customer could completely change what they want midway through the project, meaning you have to scrap everything and start again, while the customer giggles away to themselves, knowing the mental turmoil they have just caused. Plan-driven, also known by a lot of people as the normal way, is far better suited for larger projects. For example, the project which Barbara, George and Eddie have been tasked with working on is an abnormally large invoicing system which can manage grouping together invoices to the same company. It almost looks as though it could have been directly implemented into a contracting company's currently operating invoicing system, almost as though somebody is outsourcing this work to a group of intelligent and proactive students. And Eddie. Because of this, it is almost automatically decided that this project would take the normal plan-driven approach. There is also a third hidden planning option known as spicy planning, where you plan by doing no planning at all and making everything up as you go along. This could never be me though, as planning is a very crucial stage to every software engineering project I take on. During the plan-driven approach, the development process is planned in detail. The project manager is supposed to create a project plan which will record what work needs to be done, who will do each task, and the schedule for this and the required software. There are several stages involved in the process, and it can be put into the form of a document detailing the following: an introduction which explains the objectives of the project, from the most pointless ones to the ones which may actually be important. The project organisation describes how the team is organised, what their roles and responsibilities are as well. In the context of this group project, this means early damage mitigation by giving Eddie the tasks which will have minimal impact if they randomly implode. This feeds into risk analysis, where the possible risks and their likelihoods are described, along with the mitigation strategies. For this case, Eddie being the biggest risk to the project was already known. So this mainly focuses on other risks which can affect the estimated timings, which have already been taken into account given that a certain group member wasn't aware that he was in the project until yesterday morning. This can include people falling ill, leaving the project, or even non-human factors such as the failure of hardware or late delivery of essential equipment used to carry out the project. The requirements should also be listed, including the software or hardware which is required. The workload is then broken down and formed into several activities and their dependencies, from where they are scheduled in order to make optimal use of time. A general guideline here is that a task should be estimated with at least a week's worth of time and no longer than 2 months. If it's longer than that, it should be broken down into several separate tasks. When estimating, it's always a good idea to assume you're going to face some kind of issue. It may seem like you're planning for nothing, but you gotta bear in mind, nobody expects the Spanish Inquisition, whose chief weapons are fear, surprise, and ruining your software project schedule. With all this nailed down, you just now need a way of monitoring the tasks being carried out and reporting any issues which do arise. With all that, you'd think nothing could possibly go wrong. To monitor the process of the project, Barbara chose to call everyone in for weekly meetings, only to find that George had coded an entire working prototype. However, after giving it a test, the program kind of exploded and deleted the operating system off of all devices within a 6-meter radius from the system it was run on. This erased all their progress and meant they had to start over. Of course they blamed it on Eddie, as his presence in the room was enough to accuse him of being the problem. So while Eddie is off at the local pub looking for local talent to replace him on the team, Barbara is going to have to draw up some new plans. Luckily, she has got a few ideas on how she may be able to plan the project so that they don't have another dependency issue like the one which just bombed each of their devices. Along with this, new risk mitigation strategies should also be implemented in order to avoid major time losses. One such method is an activity chart of some form. This represents the project plan as a directed graph, showing the tasks which can be carried out in parallel and those which should be executed in a sequence, mainly due to a dependency of some form. If one task is dependent on several other tasks, then it should be held back until all the required tasks have been completed. Another way to think of this is by making a cheese sandwich. If you forget to take the slices of bread out and just slap the cheese on the plate, then you haven't made a cheese sandwich, you've just made a cheese. Another method of doing this is a network diagram present in the process of identifying the critical path. This is another way in which you can visualize the connections between tasks and dependencies along with defining the length of the entire process. Cross-checking the progress made against the graphs or diagrams created in this process should allow you to see where someone, not mentioning any names, has been slacking off or has perhaps had somewhat of a form of dependency issue, perhaps due to issues in the past. And through the use of interactive software, the diagram would be able to be updated to account for these issues. If one or more of the group members were to suddenly disappear through mysterious circumstances, the network diagram would then be able to reflect the changes needed in order to deliver the program on time. And with that, you should now hopefully be a mild expert in the process of planning, creating an activity plan, and some ways of monitoring the progress of a software project. In case you're curious, the project was completed by Barbara and George, only for Eddie to make a power move and sell the software to International Office Equipment after figuring out which company had set the task, which got outsourced to them. I can't fault him on this one, unfortunately. He monitored the planning process and had his own activity plan set out for making a large sum of money off of other people's work.